In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NHL games happening on January 20th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Minnesota Wild versus Montreal Canadiens. Minnesota comes into Montreal buzzing a bit after that Marcus Foligno first career hat trick and the 6-3 win in Toronto, and it is easy for that kind of game to stick in your head like a catchy song you cannot shake. If you look a little closer though, this is one of those classic schedule spots that quietly leans toward the home locker room, the kind you notice more if you have ever tried to play anything competitive while tired and living out of a suitcase. The Wild are skating the second half of a back-to-back here, with a flight tacked on, and it is also their 5th game in 11 days, a stretch where they have already bled 6 to Winnipeg, 5 to New Jersey, and 4 to the Islanders, so the legs are not exactly fresh even before you pour in Bell Center noise and travel wear. On the other bench, Montreal is rolling back into their own building after that wild 6-5 comeback in Ottawa, the one where Cole Caulfield buried another overtime winner and Juraj Slavkovsky chipped in 2, and that sort of game does more for belief than any practice drill ever could. They have had time to breathe since that Saturday thriller, time for video, meetings, and a proper reset, while Minnesota has basically been living on the hockey version of fast food, quick turnarounds and pack your bag again. Honestly, that contrast alone starts to tilt the emotional feel of the matchup, and you can picture the crowd feeding off that comeback buzz the first time Montreal strings together a good shift. On paper, Minnesota still wears the slightly shinier tag, sitting second in the Central, and that sounds impressive when you say it fast. But when you strip away the logo bias and just talk numbers, these two live in very similar neighborhoods. Montreal sits around a record of 27-15-7 with roughly 3.39 goals scored and 3.27 allowed per night, while Minnesota is around 28-13-9 with about 3.16 for and 2.8 against. That is not a huge gulf. It is more like two houses on the same street with different paint jobs. Where things really separate is the injury sheet. The Wild are still without Matt Boldy and Joel Erikssonek, one a primary finisher, the other the heartbeat matchup center, plus top 4 defender Jonas Brodin and big right shot Zach Bogosian, and Marcus Johansson is out as well. That is a lot of key minutes pulled out of the rotation, which is why so much of their offense lately has felt top-heavy, almost like a band that only trusts its first line on stage. Montreal is not perfectly healthy either, with Patrick Lane and Alex Newhook on the long-term side of the board, but the way they are winning right now is driven by the players who are actually dressed. Nick Suzuki is steering the whole thing like a calm point guard. Caulfield and Slavkovsky are finishing. Ivan Demidov brings that extra creative spark. And from the back end, Lane Hudson and Kaiden Gull are pushing play, especially with Gull back from his adductor surgery. You can almost feel the team identity settling around that young core, which matters a lot more in January than a depth scoring chart from October. If you zoom out a bit, Minnesota's recent high-event feel has been fueled by that banged-up, top-heavy lineup and a hot shooting run that is fun while it lasts, but rarely eternal. Montreal, on the other hand, has been stacking points with more depth scoring and genuine home ice energy. And when you combine that with the schedule edge, the price you are asked to pay on the Canadiens around the mid-140s on the money line starts to look like a reasonable tax, not some wild overpay. The one card left face down right now is the goalie choice. We do not have confirmed starters yet, so that piece is still speculative, and you will want to check closer to puck drop like you would check the weather before a long drive. Minnesota is likely choosing between Philip Gustafsson and Jesper Wallstedt, either one going in behind a tired defense that is missing important pieces. Montreal can pick from a rested Sam Montembeault or Jacob Dogs behind a healthier blue line, which again fits that theme of fresh legs versus a group that has been grinding through travel. The exact matchup is uncertain until the coaches post their lineups, but the rest versus fatigue gap and the bodies missing from Minnesota's side of the lineup card are very real. When you stack all of that together, the schedule spot, the injury situation, the depth and home ice energy, and the way Montreal is starting to lean into this new identity, it naturally nudges the handicap toward the Canadiens as the side more likely to carry their ticket for a full 60 minutes. As our first pick for this matchup, the Montreal Canadiens on the money line as favorites is our full game side pick. On the surface, everything screams goals. You have got Montreal coming off that 6-5 circus in Ottawa, Minnesota fresh from a 6-3 win in Toronto, and if you scroll through their recent box scores, it feels like flipping through a pinball machine high score list. It is very easy as a fan or better to get pulled along by that, because our brains love recent drama. Here is the thing, the bookmakers watch the same games you do. They know you just saw chaos, so they bump the number and make the under the uncomfortable side that no one really wants to speak up for in the group chat. If you step back to the longer view, season reality is much calmer. The combined scoring average for these two teams is basically sitting right on that 6.5 mark, and neither one is a pure shot volume monster. The Wild average around 29 shots for and just under 30 allowed each night, while Montreal sits closer to 26 shots for and a little over 27 against. They rely more on quality looks and finishing talent than on turning every game into a track meet where pucks fly from everywhere. To consistently clear 7 goals, you either need a parade of power plays that turns the night into a special team show, or you need both teams to keep finishing at the heater pace they have been on in their last 10. In that stretch, Montreal has been hovering around 3.8 goals for and just over 3 against, while Minnesota has been near 3.5 for and 3.6 against. That is hot, fun, and absolutely real in the short term, but it is also the textbook definition of a run rather than a baseline. Stylistically, there is also a decent chance both coaching staffs try to drag this particular game back towards something more sane. Montreal's coaches have just spent a couple of days watching video of blown coverages followed by heroic comebacks. They love the drama, sure, but they really hate the defensive mess that leads to it. A home game against a strong Western Conference opponent is exactly the kind of spot where you tighten the neutral zone, shorten the bench a little, lean on someone like Philip Dano for heavy defensive minutes, and happily turn the third period into trench warfare if you are up a goal. That is not a guaranteed script. It is a tactical projection based on how coaching groups usually react after wild, high-scoring games, but it makes sense in this context. On the Minnesota side, that short bench up front matters just as much for the total as it did emotionally for the side. Missing Boldy and Eriksson pulls a lot of punch out of the inside scoring areas, the bumper spot, the net front, the hard interior ice that really inflates score lines. Instead, they are more likely to lean even harder on their Quinn Hughes and Brock Faber pairing to calm things down 5-on-5, especially after that emotional win in Toronto. When your blue line leaders are thinking control first, you usually see fewer wild rushes both ways. Then there is the fatigue angle again. Back-to-backs often show up not as total collapse, but as quieter shot volume, simpler plays off the glass, and a lot of get-it-deep-and-change hockey, especially early in the game. That kind of mindset can still produce chances, but it chips away at the chaos level needed to hit some huge number. Layer on top of that a goalie pool where all 4 possible starters, Gustafsson or Wallstedt on one side and Montembolt or Dobes on the other, have the tools and track record to keep a normally paced game in that 3-2 or 4-2 corridor, and the total number starts to feel slightly inflated by recency bias. Could the skill on the ice turn this into another 7-6 fever dream where everyone is yelling and no one remembers the under halfway through the second? Of course it could. This is hockey, and puck luck plus special teams can blow up any carefully crafted handicap. But if you are looking for the side of the total that lines up with the full season scoring profile, the schedule factors, and the likely coaching instinct to tighten up after recent fireworks, you have to be willing to take the unglamorous view and lean against the idea that every night becomes a track meet. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Ottawa Senators versus Columbus Blue Jackets. Quick bit of housekeeping before we start talking about who covers and who does not. As of the morning of January 20th, 2026, the core pieces you expect for this matchup are all still in place, with Adam Fantilli, Boone Jenner, Zach Werenski, Kirill Marchenko and Charlie Coyle on the Columbus side, and Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Jake Sanderson, Dylan Cousins, Shane Pinto and Claude Giroux all still lined up for Ottawa. Columbus still has Mason Marchment, Miles Wood, Isaac Lundestrom, and Brendan Smith sitting on injured reserve, which trims some depth, and Dante Fabro plus Denton Mateychuk are listed among the short-term injury scratches on the blue line. Ottawa's main absence on the sheet is Linus Ullmark, who remains on injured reserve, and while the latest notes suggest he is back practicing with a target return of January 20th, treating him as a confirmed starter tonight would be speculation, not fact. On the betting board, books currently make Ottawa a small road favorite around -115, which tells you Columbus is the short home underdog in this spot, and everything we are about to talk through assumes that general pricing range, because a major line swing would change how the numbers feel. Now, let us talk about the side, the spread, the simple question of which bench you expect to walk out feeling like the market mispriced them. On paper, the records match, both teams sitting at something like 22 to 19 to 7, but the paths they have taken to get there feel pretty different. Columbus arrives looking like the team that just remembered hockey can actually be fun, riding that 4-game win streak since the coaching change, and they have managed a neat trick that fans love, keeping the chaos in the offensive zone while quietly tightening the bolts in their own end at 5-on-5, where they have allowed only 2 goals in the coach's first 3 games. At home, the Jackets sit at 11 to 7 to 4, which is not flashy but is very playable, and Nationwide Arena has that subtle shift in sound where the crowd starts leaning forward on rushes instead of bracing for breakdowns. Ottawa comes in with that same record but with a much swingier personality, a bit like a talented band that plays loud and fast and sometimes forgets about tuning their instruments. They bring a top 10 offense by goals per game, they carry a top 10 power play, and they can absolutely score in bunches, but they also pair that with a bottom-tier scoring defense and a penalty kill that sits at the bottom of the league around 71.5%, which is a dangerous combination for a team asked to lay a price on the road. Over their last 13 games, the Senators have given up 53 goals, a shade over 4 a night, and 14 of those have come in just the last 3, while the patchwork goaltending rotation without Ullmark has run at about an .838 save percentage during that stretch, which is a fancy way of saying pucks are going in more than any coach would like. If Ullmark does not get activated, that picture holds, and if he does get activated, then you are still talking about a goalie stepping back into game speed after missing time, which might help, but it is not guaranteed to fix everything on contact, so that part remains speculative rather than confirmed reality. On the other bench, the Jackets suddenly look like a group that believes the first goal can actually stick, which is not something Columbus fans have always been able to say with a straight face. Their blue line leads the league in goals from defensemen, 37 on the season, and that kind of production gives them an edge in games that become about point shots, tips, and rebounds, especially when the forwards are already buzzing off a winning streak. Those recent home wins over Calgary, Vancouver, and Pittsburgh did not all follow the same script either. One more grindy, one more open, one somewhere in the middle. And when you see a team win in different styles, it hints at a structure that is starting to hold up instead of a one-trick hot streak. Sprinkle in the head-to-head history this year, with Ottawa grabbing a 6-3 win in Columbus earlier, then Columbus going into Ottawa and answering with a 4-1 road win, and you get a matchup that feels more like a coin flip in practice than a comfortable favorite and underdog story. So when the pricing still leans toward the team that has been bleeding goals and taking too many penalties, and the plus side sits on the home team that has finally stitched together some 5-on-5 backbone, the argument tilts in a pretty clear direction, even if puck luck will always have a say. As our first pick for this matchup, the Columbus Blue Jackets to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Ottawa walks into this game with a top 10 offense that lives around 3.25 goals per game and a scoring defense closer to 3.4 allowed, and that alone already points you towards some noisy box scores. When you bolt that onto a high-end power play and a penalty kill that sits last in the league, you basically get a built-in recipe for games where special teams feel like a weekly soap opera. You know the plot, you just do not know who gets written off in each episode. Columbus has been trying to tighten their act under the new coach, and to be fair, they have cleaned up a lot at 5-on-5, but the underlying rhythm of their games has not turned into full-on defensive lockdown hockey. Even during this 4-game win run, 3 of those 4 contests have reached at least 6 total goals, and when your defensemen lead the entire league with 37 goals, it means you are sending a lot of pucks to the net from the blue line, which tends to create rebounds, scrambles, and those weird deflections that turn into extra goals on both sides. Short-handed, the Jackets have still given up 4 power play goals in 3 games under the new regime, so while the structure looks better at even strength, the high-pressure penalty kill moments are still very much in play for overbackers. League-wide betting data backs up the feeling that these two teams rarely play sleepy hockey. Ottawa games have gone over the number in 29 of 48 outings this season, and Columbus games have cleared the total in 24 of 48, both comfortably on the more goals than average side of the spectrum. If you zoom in on the recent sample, the Jackets are averaging just over 3 goals scored and around 3 allowed in their last 10, while the Sens sit a bit higher, closer to 3.5 for an almost 4 against, which gets you close to 7 combined before you even factor in game script or empty net madness. Head-to-head this season, we have already seen that 6-3 Ottawa win and the 4-1 Columbus responds, both living right around the usual 6 to 6.5 range you tend to see on totals for these clubs, which fits the bigger pattern rather than breaking it. For this matchup, the only real way you land comfortably under is if both goaltending performances spike sharply above what they have shown lately, especially on the Ottawa side, where that .838 save percentage run has been a problem, or if the officials pocket the whistles and special teams never really get a stage. Could that happen? Sure, weird things happen over 60 minutes, but nothing in this season's data suggests you should expect a calm, low-event game by default, especially not with the Sens penalty kill where it is in the Jackets' blue line in constant shooting mode. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Boston Bruins versus Dallas Stars. Boston rolls into Dallas feeling like the team everyone loves to ride right now, the kind of group that keeps showing up on highlight reels and score tickers with one-sided final scores that make you look twice at your phone screen. They are playing fast, they are playing confident, and they are playing the kind of straightforward north-south hockey that feeds on momentum and makes every clean breakout feel dangerous. It is not just about raw talent either, it is about rhythm, timing, that sense that when they get a lead, they know how to squeeze the life out of a game without getting cute. So on the surface, it is really easy to lean into that story and say, all right, this is the wagon, just keep backing the hot hand and enjoy the ride. Then you look at Dallas and the picture is a little messier, which is where things get interesting. The recent stretch has had more bumps than the fan base would like, a mix of frustrating losses, missed chances, and that nagging feeling that they are leaving points on the table, especially for a team with this much expectation on its shoulders. But when you zoom out from the short-term skid and think about the full body of work, you still see a strong home group that knows how to handle its own rink, manage matchups, and feed off a crowd that expects deep spring hockey, not just regular season box scores. Odds makers clearly see that bigger picture too, because even with Boston rolling, Dallas is still priced as the clear favorite at home, which tells you the market is not buying a collapse. It is pricing a good team that has hit a rough patch rather than a broken one. Honestly, this is where a lot of bettors get tied in knots. You have the road team that looks amazing in the rearview mirror and the home favorite that has burned people a bit lately. And the natural instinct is to chase what just worked and avoid the thing that just hurt you. But those numbers at the window, with Dallas still carrying that favorite tag, are a reminder that the books expect this roster and this building to matter, especially as games tighten up and the season wears on. Special teams, late game pushes, and that habit Dallas has of waking up in the third when the game is still there to be grabbed, all feed into this idea that the slump is not the whole story, it is just the loudest part of it. If you are the kind of person who likes buying low on quality rather than buying high on heat, this spot has that written all over it, even if it feels a little uncomfortable in the moment. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dallas Stars on the money line as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, you could talk yourself into a tight, chess match kind of game, two serious teams feeling each other out, trading careful shifts and waiting for mistakes. In reality, the way these two play, it often does not stay calm for very long once something breaks the dam. Both offenses have the ability to turn a quiet stretch into a run in a hurry, and they do not need 40 shots a night to do it. They thrive on quality looks, odd man rushes, quick puck movement, and those broken plays where one missed assignment suddenly becomes a tap in at the back post. When that kind of style runs into modern officiating and all the extra attention on stick infractions and net front battles, you get nights where the penalty boxes see a lot of traffic, and that is where the total really comes to life. Here is the thing, anytime you have two capable power plays sharing the ice with physical 5-on-5 hockey, the game can flip from tight to wide open very quickly. A chippy second period, one scrappy sequence in front of the crease, a couple of borderline calls, and suddenly both benches are trading power play chances instead of trading dump-ins. Once the first real breakthrough happens, you can almost feel the structure loosen a bit because both teams know the other side can score in bunches, and that can push the tempo even if the coaches are preaching patience. And we have not even talked about the last 10 minutes yet, which is where totals often get decided. If this one is close in the third, you are looking at a scenario where the team that trails has to stretch the ice, take more risks, activate defensemen, and eventually pull the goalie if they are still chasing it. That is exactly the kind of script that turns a respectable mid-range total into something that looks a little louder on the scoreboard than the first half of the night suggested. The number sitting in that middle zone is basically the market hinting that it expects real chances both ways, and that a normal night between these two styles leans more toward fireworks than a sleepy grind. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. New Jersey Devils versus Edmonton Oilers. Quick, the market has put a bright favorite tag on Edmonton at home, with a money line in that rough -160 neighborhood. New Jersey catching the usual puck line cushion at +1.5, and the Oilers laying -1.5 at plus money for anyone who loves stress. Honestly, it feels like one of those classic spots where the casual bettor looks at the board, sees the logo, remembers a couple highlight reels, and thinks, yeah, that seems simple enough. On the surface, you can see why people lean that way. Edmonton is sitting around 25 to 17 to 8 overall. They have been strong at home with something like 12 to 6 to 4 in their own building, and they are coming off those loud score lines, a 5-0 handling of St. Louis, and a 6-0 shutout in Vancouver, with Connor Ingram carrying a save percentage right around 0.917 that looks very pretty on a graphics package. New Jersey walks in with a very different story attached to them. Their record looks more uneven at first glance, around 25 to 22 to 2, and the road line reads 13 to 13 to 0, which screams coin flip more than contender. They also had to skate last night, fighting through a 2-1 overtime win in Calgary, which always sounds tiring just to say out loud, with Jacob Markstrom standing tall against his old team and Luke Hughes exiting with that upper body issue that has him out for the rest of this swing. So if you only check the app, see the records, see the travel, and see the last scores, it is easy to feel like this is one-way traffic toward the home side. Here is the thing, when you go a bit deeper into the matchup, the picture is not that clean. Edmonton is not exactly rolling out the fully loaded sports car here. Leon Draisaitl is not available. Kasperi Kapanen is also ruled out right now, both slated to miss time until later in the month, and Adam Henrique is still on long-term injured reserve. So once you get past the top-line firepower, the forward group gets a lot more patched together and a lot less terrifying for a prepared opponent. New Jersey, on the other hand, still has its main offensive core in uniform, with Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt all active and driving play, and Markstrom slowly turning their crease from a circus into something that looks reliable. If you look at how the Devils have handled the last couple of weeks, there is a subtle shift in how they carry themselves. They snapped a rough stretch with a 5-2 win in Minnesota, followed that with a 3-2 overtime grind against Seattle, pulled off that 2-1 road win in Calgary last night, and even in the 4-3 loss in Winnipeg, they led twice and forced a very good team to chase the game rather than just hanging on and hoping. It is the kind of stretch that does not always grab national attention, but bettors remember it because you start to see a team getting comfortable in tight games instead of melting when things get tense. There is a bit of personality forming there, a willingness to be annoying for 60 minutes. Edmonton's recent run looks like fireworks when you see the scores, but there is a bit of context hiding under there too. Those huge numbers against Vancouver and St. Louis came against a Canucks team in a skid and a Blues side that has been very up and down, and in that same window, the Oilers have also lost 1-0 at home to the Islanders and needed overtime to sneak past Nashville in a 4-3 game. So the range of outcomes for them has been wider than the public perception suggests. Some nights they look like a buzzsaw, other nights they look a lot more like a team that can get dragged into a grind. And New Jersey has already shown in this exact matchup that they are not scared of the crest on the other bench. Earlier this season, at home in Newark, they took a 5-3 win off the Oilers, which does not automatically predict tonight, but it does tell you the Devils know they can trade punches with this roster without shrinking under the spotlight. Psychology is not everything in a handicap, but in a loud Canadian building with a superstar on the other side, it helps to know the underdog has already proven to itself that it can finish the job. What makes the spread interesting here is how the Devils are slowly leaning into a more structured, slightly uglier brand of hockey. They have Markstrom making the first save more often. Their stars are buying into the idea of living with a boring neutral zone for long stretches, and that all tilts toward a team that does not go away quietly even when the opponent has the flashier offense. Edmonton still has Connor McDavid, who can shred a game state in a heartbeat. No one is pretending otherwise, but with the secondary scoring thinned out and New Jersey becoming more comfortable in tight, low-margin games, the door is wide open for the road team to hang inside one goal even if the talent gap shows up in a few shifts. As our first pick for this matchup, the New Jersey Devils to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Books have set this one at 6.5 goals, which is basically the math way of asking, do you believe this turns into a track meet or something closer to a controlled fire? If you grab the season averages, Edmonton is sitting around 3.40 goals for per game and 3.10 against, while New Jersey comes in near 2.57 scored and 3.06 allowed. So if you mash those together, you land in that mid-6 range that tempts people toward expecting chaos. But hockey totals are funny because the path to that number matters almost as much as the number itself. When you scroll through the Devils' last 5 games, the combined scores read like this: 2-1 in Calgary, 4-1 against Carolina, 3-2 against Seattle, 5-2 in Minnesota, and 4-3 in Winnipeg. So you get a mix, a couple of 7-goal nights and a cluster of games that stick right at 5, and a clear pattern where, when Markstrom is locked in and they stay disciplined, they can drag even good offenses into quieter, low-event evenings, especially on the road. For bettors, that kind of profile is interesting because it tells you the same team can flip between grind and run, depending on how well they manage fatigue, structure, and puck decisions. Edmonton's recent scoreboard looks wild, but here too, the sum is a little more modest than the parts. You see the 6-0 result in Vancouver, the 5-0 win at home over St. Louis, and your brain immediately jumps to automatic over. Yet, 4 of their last 5 games have landed at 5 total goals or fewer. That includes that 1-0 loss at home to the Islanders and a 4-1 road win in Chicago, with only the 4-3 overtime win against Nashville actually sneaking beyond this 6.5 line. It is a bit like watching a flashy trailer for a movie and then realizing the big scenes are spread out instead of being constant. Special teams always loom large when you are talking about a high total, and both clubs have very defined identities there. Edmonton's power play is still sitting in that roughly 33% stratosphere, which is absurd by any era's standards, while New Jersey's man advantage works more in the low 20s. On the kill, both teams live in that high 70s to low 80s zone, solid but not suffocating, and that combination, a lethal top unit on one side and competent penalty killing on both, tends to produce spikes of danger without turning every single whistle into a guaranteed goal. Where it gets really interesting for the total is the personnel that are missing. Draisaitl is one of the best offensive engines in the league, and with him out, along with Kasperi Kapanen and Adam Henrique, a lot of Edmonton's supporting cast offense and face-off strength disappears, which usually hurts scoring depth more than it hurts basic defensive structure. On the Devils' side, losing Luke Hughes removes a big chunk of their transition pop from the back end. That first clean pass and that extra offensive layer from the blue line, and that also nudges things away from end-to-end trading and toward a simpler north-south approach. The guys in net are also a huge part of why this total feels a bit rich. Connor Ingram has come in and given Edmonton results that look like a true starter in a smaller sample, calming down some of the wild swings that used to live behind this offense. Jacob Markstrom is fresh off that 21 save night against Calgary, and he has stacked a handful of quality starts lately, which is exactly what you want behind a team that is trying to play a tidier road game. When both sides have goaltending that is actually bailing them out instead of putting them in a hole, that usually trims a goal or two off the more extreme outcomes. Then there is the schedule spot, which matters more than people admit when they are building a same-game parlay on their phone. Second half of a back-to-back, New Jersey usually leans into shorter shifts, safer exits, and fewer risky cross-ice plays through the neutral zone because nobody wants to be chasing the game with tired legs in the third period. That kind of game plan naturally pulls shot volume and rush chances down. On the other bench, Edmonton has quietly tightened up defensively during this recent run, even if the headlines keep focusing on the big goal totals, and that combination, a tired team choosing to simplify and a favorite actually caring about their structure, often points away from the track meet that a 6.5 total is hinting at. Put all of that together, the season averages, the recent scores, the missing offensive pieces, the goalie form, and the scheduling context, and this number looks a little high for the type of game script we are likely to see, one that leans more toward tense and controlled than pond hockey with extra lights. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.